Have your Bibles, I want us to turn to Genesis, the 42nd chapter. And I want to again to look at Joseph, this character that's a type of, in the Word of God, that's a type of Jesus. And I have spoken on this before a couple times, and now want to go back and again go over some that I've gone over before, but trust that God will help us to get into something new also. Starting with the 42nd chapter, the first verse says, "Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you look one upon another? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, where the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food." May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his precious word. I have preached before in this area about Joseph, and I just, you are all aware of Joseph being a type of Jesus. We'll not go into that again. But I do want to say that the difficulty, of course, in the life of Joseph started from a revelation. When he was not liked by his brethren, but the difficulty started when he got the revelation from heaven about his brethren bowing before him. They did not want this. They did not want to bow before Joseph or have him rule over him, so you know the story. They took him and threw him in a pit when he came out to visit them. They drew him out of the pit, sold him to Ishmaelites. But there's one thing I was interested as I was reading the story again that might encourage our hearts if we can see the sovereignty of God in this. I want to tell you, if I'd have been in Joseph's position, I believe I'd have thought God had forgotten me. I think that I'd have thought, Dear Lord, I've been a good boy. He was a good boy at home, and it certainly looked like that he didn't deserve what was coming his way. He was thrown in a pit and drawn out and sold as a slave, and then down in Egypt put into prison, and it just looked like things went from bad to worse, and falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and it just seemed like it got worse and worse and worse and worse for this dear boy. And if anybody, and I tell you, that didn't last for just a day or a week or a few weeks or a few months. That was for 13 years. For 13 years, his story went from bad to worse. Now, I tell you, in 13 years' time, I kind of believe that somebody could have very easily thought, now God has certainly forgotten me. And he could have, I know the devil doesn't miss anybody, but he certainly could have come on the scene and thought of how well his brothers were being treated and how well they fared and how well others had been, and he was the only one he knew that was in slavery, and all of the things that could have come to him. Everybody was better off than he was. Well, what I want you to see again is God's sovereignty. If we could get this into our hearts, that if we could see God in circumstances and trust Him when it looks like everything is going against us, if we could trust Him because God is sovereign, and if we're obeying God, if we're doing the best we know how and we're obeying God, if we could realize that God is sovereign over our circumstances. He has not forgotten us. He had not forgotten Joseph. And I think it says in the book of Psalms that they put iron around his ankles, and the center column reference says the iron got in his soul. God was trying to get the iron in Joseph's soul. God had not forgotten him, but he was trying to get the iron in his soul by these circumstances. So let's not be dismayed. There's just something within us. There is something within us that wants everything to run smooth. There is just something within us that we do not want adversity. We do not want difficulties. We do not want problems. We do not want trials. We don't want to be treated worse than anybody else. We want to be treated at least as well as everybody else. We don't want to have to say, well, look, everybody else is getting better than... We don't want that, and yet this is the iron that got in Joseph's soul. So God is sovereign. He is sovereign over all circumstances. And this is where trust comes in, that we're trusting God when we cannot see. Now, the iron never could have gotten in Joseph's soul if God would have said, well, now, Joseph, next I'm going to let you go down here. God didn't explain anything to him. He had to trust God for all of this. And so we can see that God is a God that controls our circumstances. Well, of course, when God brought Joseph out of prison and put him on the throne, these adverse circumstances made him usable in God's kingdom. He would have been no use on the throne had he not gone through these adverse circumstances. He'd have been no use to God's kingdom on the throne next to Pharaoh. But it took 13 years of God's dealing with him to get him where he wanted him, so that when he was on the throne, it did not go to his head and ruin him. Before God can elevate us, he certainly has to take us down quite a road, or the elevation would ruin us. Now, if we can be faithful in these years of difficulty and seemingly when God has forgotten us, there may be a place of elevation down the road a ways if we can be faithful in our trust to God. Well, anyhow, when he got on the throne, of course, God then arranged the circumstances for his brethren to come down to see him, and this is part of what I want you to see. I've mentioned, I think, in preaching before, that the first time they came merely because of their circumstances. They came to Egypt to buy some corn, as it says here. Joseph, of course, gave them what they were after, but here's the thing that I'm trusting that we can see, and that is that many times circumstances drive us to God, but the thing that we ask for often is not the thing we need. Now, we need it in a way. They came for corn, and they needed corn, but that wasn't their real need. Their real need was in their hearts. And Joseph, of course, then it says, didn't make himself known to his brethren because he knew they needed more than corn. Now, dear ones, the thing that I want to get across to us tonight is that many times when we come to God for things, we really need something different than we're asking. Or let me put it this way, we need more than we're asking. For instance, let's use this term of carnality and cleansing. Many times we come to God and we want cleansing. We say, oh God, I want cleansing, but God knows that many times that we need something deeper. There's something deeper yet than cleansing. Now let me explain what I mean. Why do we want to be cleansed? Well, many times it's because this carnal nature of ours causes us trouble in homes, difficulty between husbands and wives, difficulty where we work, difficulty to go, oh God, if you could cleanse my heart, things would be a lot better. And many times the cleansing we want is really for our betterment. We want to get along better with our wives. We want to get along better at the job. We want to get along better with our friends. We want to get along better in society. And we want cleansing, and God knows that we need it, but He knows we need something better. He knows we need something deeper, and many times He gives us some cleansing, but still He's leading us to something deeper yet. Now, this is the way it was with Joseph when his brethren came. They came for a load of corn. They were hungry. They needed corn, and he knew that, and he gave them some. But Joseph also knew that they needed something different. They needed more than that. Now, the thing that they needed, and that God knows we need something deeper, and that is we need our will broken. You see, if He were to cleanse our hearts of all carnality, without our will being broken, we might be saying, well, that would make it wonderful. We could sit at home. We never have any trouble with the husbands and wives. We'd be so happy sitting at home. Never have any trouble with friends. We'd be happy right where we are. But God primarily is trying to get at our will. Above cleansing, above carnality, above everything else. And He often lets carnality be the thing to drive us to Him until He can get our will. But after He gets our will, I believe we'll get the complete cleansing. I believe if God can get our will. Now, if he cleansed us before He got our will, we'd be happy to sit home and do nothing. Well, we just have one happy family. So I tell you, it's wonderful. My wife and I, we just get along so wonderful. We aren't in any trouble. God's cleansed all carnality out. But God maybe could not get us, but He needs our will. This is what He needs. And many times carnality is the thing that will keep driving us to Him. And this is the thing with Joseph. They kept needing to come back and back for corn and back for some more corn until the thing that Joseph was after he got, and that was the will of these boys, completely surrendered and given up to God. Joseph would not be satisfied with anything else. I'm glad God's not satisfied with just giving us the thing that we ask for. He keeps holding off for the thing that we knows we really need. He knows that we need to have a will that is completely surrendered to Him. And He will not be satisfied to give us everything. He'll give us a little. He helps us along the way. And He gives it, and the thing we're asking for is good. But still the thing that God is after is a will that will do what God wants. So God keeps working for us and working with us in this very area until our wills can be completely His. Well, when the boys got to the place where they were willing to come to Joseph, not just for corn, but in absolute surrender to Joseph, whatever he did with them. And Reuben, you know the account finally, when the younger brother was brought down, finally put it to the place. They were willing to stay, was willing to stay as a slave, to do whatever Joseph said. This is the thing Joseph was driving at when he got their wills in complete submission. And then he saw that, the corn, that was almost an irrelevant thing. He could not have invited. Suppose Joseph would have gone to his brethren, and he could have done it immediately as soon as he was next to Pharaoh and gathering all the food of Egypt. He could have searched his brethren out and said, look, fellows, brothers, I'm next to Pharaoh on the throne. We're having a marvelous income of food and that, and there's going to be famine. Why don't you come on down, move down, and I'll take care of you. He could have sought them out and done that for them, but their wills would never have been broken. And I want to tell you something. He could not afford to have these brothers down into Egypt until their will was broken. So God cannot afford to have us in his place in the kingdom until our wills are broken. He cannot afford to have us there. Now, he'll keep giving us a little cleansing, keep helping us to overcome carnality. He'll keep helping us in these areas, but he cannot give us the full revelation of himself in our place and invite us all down to live completely in his presence until our wills are completely surrendered to him in every detail. And then he gave the wonderful revelation of himself and invited them to move down there with him and live with him and stay with him. Said, if you can come down and stay with me, just live with me. Then Joseph, he got them the thing they really needed. He got them to get the thing they really need. I'm glad he didn't stop with just what they asked for. I'm glad God doesn't stop with us just the thing we ask for. God knows we have often deeper needs, and he keeps on working with us until he gets that deeper need met, which is a will that's completely surrendered to God. And I believe when that happens, all of these other things will take care of themselves. Now, I'm thankful for one thing, and that is that God knows when to do something. Joseph knew when to reveal himself to his brethren. And he didn't do it when they did the asking. He did it when he knew it was time to do the revealing. And I picked up again John Wesley's book on 50, this one's 52 sermons, and go back to the sermon that Jerry drew our attention to some time ago, about when we bemoan our condition. And I think Jerry brought it out so beautifully that we need to thank God that we're, Jerry, I'm not even correct me if I'm saying it wrong, saying right, we can thank God we're not what we used to be. Instead of going around moaning and complaining and thinking, oh dear, I've got carnality, and that's true, we should hate it. We want it cleansed, but at the same time, we need to keep looking to Jesus, surrendering our will, and rejoicing. John Wesley says we need to rejoice that we're not what we used to be, and to rejoice that God will someday bring us to where we want to be. We need to rejoice in that, but here's one thing also in that same chapter that I wanted to read that I like so well, and he says, you know, a day, an hour, a moment with God is as 1,000 years. He cannot be straitened for time, wherein to work whatever remains to be done in your soul. God's time is always the best. So God knows when to bring about that in our soul which needs to be done, but I believe one of the primary things is our will that needs to be brought in complete surrender and subjection to God. I believe this stands at the core of it, and I believe many other things will fall into line when God can get our will completely surrendered to him.